Thank you, Meghna. My life in the theater really began over 60 years ago as a small boy in love with the music of Broadway. Even though I was a teenager during the tumultuous 1960s, and as they say, the times they were a-changin', I still knew more about the music of Ethel Merman than I did about Bob Dylan. As a boy, I would take the number 12 bus from the Pelham Parkway section of the Bronx where I lived down Fordham Road to a branch of the New York Public Library where I would check out Broadway cast albums the way other people checked out books. And I would carry as many as I could and get them back, trundle them onto the bus and up the parkway and into my parents' apartment where I would play them on the record player all afternoon, singing and dancing and acting them out all by myself. I did this for years. It is possible that by the time I was 20, for a few brief moments, I knew more Broadway musicals by heart than any other straight man in America. Fast forward 20 years, I am now 31 years old, and I walk into the Huntington Theatre for the very first time. It is still called the Boston University Theatre. It is classical, it is elegant, it reminds me of the Broadway theaters of my youth, and I am in love. One of the great privileges of my job is that I get to run over to the theater to see my favorite scenes from my favorite plays as often as I want. And my favorite vantage point is peeking through the curtains so that I could see the actors on stage and the audience reactions at the same time. I loved watching the audience, whether they were hysterical with pleasure because there's a tap dance number in Animal Crackers, the Marx Brothers musical, or rapt with attention and emotion because the great Viola Davis is on stage at the Huntington in August Wilson's 7 Guitars, and she's describing how she saw 4 men in black suits reach into the grave of her lover, Floyd Barton, and lift him up to heaven. I am that same romantic as I am sitting in my office in the summer of 2015, and I get a call from the provost of Boston University. Now, this is a call that I've been expecting with some growing trepidation for many, many months. Because months before, the Huntington had actually offered to buy the theater from BU. We were offering to buy the theater from BU because a couple of years earlier and for the succeeding years, BU had made it very clear that they really didn't want to maintain the facility anymore. And for those of you who have been in the Huntington in 2015, it really needed a lot of work. And so we had mutually agreed that the best thing would be for the Huntington to buy the theater and renovate it on our own. We had spent well over a year negotiating, and I thought that we were this close to a deal. The provost had a different message. Michael, she said, the university is going to sell the theater, but not to the Huntington. The trustees have decided that given this enormous real estate boom we're in the middle of, we can make a lot more money if we sell the theater on the open market. I was completely blindsided. Even worse, there were no restrictions on the future use of the sale of the theater. And so somebody who bought it could knock down this historic building and build office buildings or condominiums. It suddenly occurred to me that this one transaction could eliminate what my colleagues and I had been working on for over 30 years. What would happen to the tens of thousands of people who came to the theater? What would happen to the hundreds of working artists each year, to the dedicated staff of the Huntington who depended on the theater for their passion and their livelihood? This would be a disaster for the city of Boston. So I found myself a few days later in City Hall, conferring with two senior aides to the mayor, Marty Walsh, and they were trying to figure out how we were together going to make this the best outcome that we possibly could. And they were assuring me that they would do whatever they could think of to do, but I really needed to hear it from himself. And so at the end of the meeting, the mayor walked in, and he came and he sat down and he said, if we work together, Michael, I really think we are going to figure this out. So I felt a little better. But after all, there are limits on what even a mayor can do. After all, a mayor can't get in the way or interfere with a private sale between BU and a developer. But what he could do is make it clear to whoever bought the building that the city of Boston and the mayor personally wanted to see a way for the theater to continue. Within a few weeks, I actually found myself at WBUR being interviewed by Meghna Chakrabarty. And Meghna had obviously gotten all the information about the sale that was pending, and she asked a very reasonable question. She said, Michael, where's the Huntington going? And I said, well, we really aren't planning on going anywhere. And she gave me that look. But that look at that moment said, what have you been smoking? But it was radio, and so what she said was, BU says you have to leave. I know. But I really think that there's a better way forward. A way that will get BU and the buyer and the city and all the people the Huntington serves what they need. I had one ace up my sleeve. I knew that Northeastern was very interested in spending a lot of money to buy the theater. After all, the theater was adjacent to their campus, and they would work with the Huntington moving forward. And I thought, well, that's going to be the answer. Because after all, Northeastern, with their clout and their sophistication and their money, no one is going to outbid Northeastern University for this theater. Wrong again. At $25 million, the purchase price of the theater complex was twice what the Huntington had expected to pay, and 20% more than any other developer, including Northeastern. So the winning bidders go to BU to get congratulated, and someone at BU says, oh, by the way, you really need to go down to City Hall and talk to the mayor. And they go down to City Hall, and Marty Walsh says, don't talk to me. What you need to do is go to the Huntington and talk to Michael and his team. So by then, they'd figured out what was going on, and the developers came, and they couldn't have been nicer, and they said, don't worry about this. We've got this. We'll knock down the theater, sure. And then, whatever we build, you'll have a nice little theater that we'll put inside it. And we said, thank you very much. But no. No? We said no, because the public opposition that already exists is going to explode the day you say you're going to knock down the theater. And those folks are going to really slow you down or kill this project, and they'll do it even if we endorse it, but of course we won't. So what we have to do is find a better way to work together on a solution that serves us all. And it was at that moment when I saw their faces that I realized that this could actually work. A few months later, Marty Walsh strode onto the stage of the Huntington. And he said, number one, the deed to the historic theater is going to the Huntington, which has committed to the renovation. Number two, The developers, in exchange for giving us the theater, is going to get to build a 36-story apartment building next door, and when they're done, the Huntington will get 14,000 additional square feet for audience and new performance space. The bottom line, said Marty Walsh, is that the Huntington is staying on Huntington Avenue where it belongs. The crowd applauded. It was a very heady moment. It was emotional. But as the VIPs began to leave the stage, suddenly I heard what the soundboard operator had been playing through the microphones and our loudspeakers. It was a song by a band named Madness. And Madness was singing, "Our house in the middle of our street, our house in the middle of our street." After 34 years, it was finally our house. Thank you.